12 terrifying horror anthology movies that you cannot miss. The popularity of horror anthology dates back to 1916, when D.W. Griffith impressed the audience with his movie Intolerance. Slowly, the idea of anthologies for horror flicks was popularized, and people seemed to love the abundance of plots within a short time period. After all, the only thing better than a scary story is a few more. The trend somehow enhances the comfort zone that we share regarding a cluster of stories put together. Be it around a campfire or on a school trip, we have all enjoyed these eerie, sleepless nights with some creepy stories to set the tone. There have been some amazing horror anthology movies along the way, and in this video, we have picked the ones that you absolutely cannot miss out on. Pull up the blanket, dim the lights, and enjoy the fearful journey.
Before we go into our list, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click from you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you. Let's begin.
KWAIDAN, 1964. This eerie anthology presents 4 folk tales that are generously laced with some spine-chilling moments. The first story is about a samurai warrior who divorces his wife to be with a woman for her money. However, when he realizes his mistake, he tries coming back to his ex, only to make some shocking discoveries. In the second story, a man finds himself vulnerable in a terrifying blizzard. He is saved by Yuki, the snow maiden, but the rescue comes at a cost. In another story, we find a blind musician performing in front of an audience. The only catch is that his audience doesn't comprise of humans, but ghosts. In the last instance, we find a samurai who can see the reflection of another warrior in his teacup. When we describe a horror flick, we seldom use words like evocation, lyrical, and artistic. Yet these are the first things that come to our mind while thinking about this astonishing horror anthology that is gifted with some unforgettable imagery. It is no surprise that the film won an Oscar nomination for the Best Foreign Film category, and this Japanese underappreciated movie has some of the most haunting tales that you will find. Our personal favorite is the first story titled Black Hair, although we are also in awe of the jaw-dropping sea battle sequence in Hoichi the Earless. The stories evoke an ideal atmosphere for horror, and the combination of supernatural elements with the perfect use of color in lighting and sets will blow your mind. It's a shame that the director Masaki Kobayashi doesn't get as much credit as the likes of Akira Kurosawa, but he does leave a mark with his work on this one. Trilogy of Terror, 1975. Trilogy of Terror presents 3 interwoven stories that have tormented women as the central characters. The first story is about a college teacher who is being blackmailed by one of the students, who has a crush on her. However, the student has no clue that he is only playing according to her plans. The second story is about 2 sisters, one of whom is evil while the other is good. The best is saved for last, as the final story narrates the horrors brought about by a Zuni fetish doll that comes to life and terrorizes a woman. This movie wouldn't have been possible without the wonderful performance of Karen Black, the B-movie goddess who has the perfect looks to pull off a scary role. She is the protagonist in all 3 stories and does a convincing job with her characters. While the first 2 stories can be passed off as ordinary attempts to scare the audience, the final one will genuinely freak you out. After watching this, you would keep any dolls in the house locked in the cupboard. The climatic scene for the final plot was terrifying, even for the bravest souls. You will certainly not get over the scream of the doll anytime soon. Three, Extremes, 2004. We haven't come across a more fitting title because all 3 stories in this anthology are rather extreme. The first story, titled Dumplings, is about an aging actress who wishes to look youthful to appeal to her husband. In the quest, she seeks the assistance of a witch doctor who gives her strange dumplings to eat. The second horrifying tale shows a director and his wife facing the wrath of a crazy extra who worked in his movies. In the third story, called Box, two young sisters are faced with a tragic accident, and only one manages to survive. However, she has some suffocating and disturbing dreams of her dead sister. These are three horror stories of varying tastes, and it's extremely tough to pick a clear winner. However, we felt that the third story was probably the creepiest, with a psychosexual aspect to it that makes the haunting narrative all the more unsettling. The second story, where the director's wife is being held by the crazy extra, will remind you of the movie Saw, and as for the first one, all we can say is don't watch it after a heavy meal. You will find an effective element of paranormal activities and surrealism in the stories, but they are not the usual slasher killer flicks. The fans of intelligently made, artistic horror movies will find this Asian combination to be a delightful appetizer. Trick or Treat, 2007. This is indeed a treat containing 5 interwoven storylines that will scare the pants off you. It tells the harrowing tale of a school principal who is secretly a serial killer, a group of teenagers playing a prank that goes terribly wrong, a virgin girl who thinks she found the right guy for her, and a mean old man who is visited by a special trick-or-treater. All of these happen on the night of Halloween, when the dead rise to walk among the living. This is a surprisingly good Halloween fare and is somewhat similar in nature to classics like Tales from the Darkside and CREEPSHOW. All the stories are well conceived and the twists are nicely concealed. The plotline is richly steeped in tradition, and it reminds you why we celebrate the fabled holiday. Although the stories are creepy and often get bloody, there is no over-the-top gratuitous gore to disturb your peace. We thoroughly enjoyed the hint of black comedy that makes the storytelling entertaining without resorting to meaningless parodies of horror flicks. There are some praiseworthy performances from the likes of Anna Paquin and Brian Cox, and even with a limited budget, the production team puts up quite a show. Michael Dougherty's Trick or Treat is also helped by some exquisite art direction and is a must-watch for all you horror fans out there. Tales from the Hood, 1995. In this anthology, the theme is borrowed from the time-tested ways of getting it out to the audience. A mortician is seen telling some creepy stories to a group of teenagers. The first one is about a man killed by corrupt police officials. One of the officers starts hearing the dead man's voice from beyond the grave, seeking justice. The next story is about a young boy who is being tormented by a monster. For the third one, you have a white supremacist running for governor's post. As the final and probably the creepiest tale, they narrate a story of a ruthless criminal who decides to undergo a strange behavioral modification program. One can argue that the stories in this movie are not particularly scary, but they do serve a good purpose. If you notice carefully, you will find that the stories deal with prevalent issues in our society, such as police brutality, domestic violence, racism, and crime. There is a clear message in the stories, and we personally love the fourth one the best. While there are no such shocking moments, some unpredictable scenes will make you sit up straight in your seats. The engaging script and the fast-paced events will keep you glued to your seats, and the director Rusty Condieff deserves all the credit for his good work. Although the stories are about proceedings with social morality, they never sound preachy, and you will have an entertaining evening with this movie and some popcorn. Twilight Zone, the movie, 1983. 4 famous directors come together to pay tribute to one of the most popular shows on TV, and a horror anthology seems like the perfect way to do so. In the first story, we find a bigoted racist businessman who gets transported back in time to the 1940s, where the Nazis pursue him. The second one is the bizarre string of events that unfold at a retirement home when an old man makes the wishes of the residents come true by turning them into their youthful selves. The last story will play with your mind as a young woman gets trapped in an alternate reality formed by a young boy's imagination. With the lineup of directors for this movie, you would expect a cracker of content. However, things didn't turn out that great, and despite the brilliance in a couple of stories, the expectations of the fans were never met. John Landis, Joe Dante, Steven Spielberg, and George Miller come together to create a masterpiece. But except for George Miller's fourth segment, the others don't really match up to the talents of the directors. The work with special effects is impressive, and there are certain scenes that will give you nightmares in the times to come. Overall, this movie has attained cult status in all these years and deserves all the attention that it gets. CREEPSHOW, 1982. What happens when a monster escapes from its confinement? How does a husband get his revenge on his cheating wife? Why does a strange homeowner have a crazy bug problem? And what happens when a rural man gets to meet a visitor from outer space? Well, all these answers and much more are contained in this exciting anthology that brings together 5 short and terrifying stories. The story and screenplay were penned down by none other than the versatile Stephen King, and his impactful writing leaves a good taste in your mouth. The direction of George A. Romero needs no introduction, and he stays true to the task yet again. 2 masters in their individual fields join hands to put together this masterpiece, and all the stories are exciting to the core. The cast is a mixture of old and new, and they all do a fabulous job. The designs for the movie were flawless, and the makeup effects by Tom Savini deserves a special word of appreciation. The storytelling is cheesy and campy at times, but that only adds to the fun quotient. The 2 horror icons have worked their magic on this one, and you simply cannot afford to miss out on this exceptionally well-crafted movie. Cat's Eye, 1985. 3 horrifying tales are linked by a stray cat that moves from one place to another in the course of events. The cat is first picked up by a strange man who is using some unique techniques to make people quit smoking. The only problem is that the consequences seem to be a bit too extreme for comfort. Later, the cat is picked up by a shady millionaire who makes his wife's lover walk along the narrow ledge around his high-rise residence. In the last story, the cat is in North Carolina to protect a young girl from a deadly evil troll. Cat's Eye, for many, is one of the best works of Stephen King, and this movie is a fitting adaptation of the classic. The idea of the stories taking place from a cat's perspective is pretty unique and bodes well for the plot. The suspense throughout the plot is enjoyable, and there are some comedy-loaded moments to lighten the mood. We are simply in love with the second story, simply for the bizarre premise that makes things way too crazy. The surprising twist at the end is sure to leave you puzzled. The little demon in the third story is adorable but extremely mean-looking at the same time. These wry, creepy, and humorous stories will be loved by all the fans of horror and Stephen King. Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, 1990. The fiery feelings of revenge can take a resentful man really far, as we can see from the first story in this anthology. The student takes the help of an ancient Egyptian mummy to exact his vengeance without realizing the consequences. The second story shows the chaos around a wealthy family where a cat terrorizes and even kills some of the family members. They summon a hitman to kill the cat, but things are just not that simple. The last one is about a struggling artist who makes a deal with the devil in return for his life. One of the things that we love about this anthology is that the premise is as entertaining as the stories that follow. It starts off with a boy who is telling creepy stories to a witch so that she is distracted and doesn't eat him. This is certainly among the better horror movies from the 90s with some gripping stories and a talented cast. The movie featured the likes of Christian Slater, Julianne Moore, and Steve Buscemi. The second story about the devilish cat is one of William Hickey's last roles. The third story about the man who makes a deal with a gargoyle is probably the highlight of this anthology. All horror buffs out there must find time to check this one out, in case you haven't already. Tales from the Crypt, 1972. 5 people are trapped in a crypt, and the crypt keeper has visions of how they will die. However, there is a way to avoid their fate, but first, they have to experience what they will be doing in their future or the things they have done in their past. As a result, we are treated to 5 terrifying stories that will chill your bones. This isn't your typical bedtime story, but the stuff that nightmares are made up of. Amicus Studios have made a name for themselves with their work around anthology films, and they live up to their skills. A rather impressive cast consisting of Peter Cushing, Ian Hendry, Joan Collins, and Richard Green helped their cause. The story involving Peter Cushing is particularly touching as he plays the role of a man mourning the death of his wife. One of the problems in this film is that the stories do not get enough time to breathe to its full potential. Overall, you will have a great group of frightening stories, with each having a moral of sorts. If you consider yourself to be a fan of the macabre, seek this movie out and enjoy the chill factor that drives the movie to be one of the best of its kind. Southbound, 2015. A long night's drive through a desolate stretch of desert highway is a brilliant premise to kick off a horror story. Southbound does just that with a group of tired travelers who encounter the horrifying events that unfold before them. 2 of the men are running from their past, while a band is on their way to perform at a gig. A family is on vacation, and a brother is looking for his long-lost sister. All these diverse characters have their fate entwined in a series of events as deep, dark secrets creep out of the cupboards. It is hard to believe that the movie came out in the year of 2015. From the grindhouse look and feel of it, the film was perfectly suited for the glorious 80s and 90s when such themes were gaining ground. It will remind you of the old pulp horror comics, and the intertwined stories are fascinating enough to keep you hooked onto them. The highway actually represents hell, and the people here are all suffering for eternity in a loop. The movie portrays their agonizing journey of sins and personal horrors. The innovative and unique concept shows an intelligent approach to anthology flicks, and the multiple interpretations give you some food for thought as well. This is one of the finest horror anthologies in recent times and can be the perfect flick to pick for a movie night. Black Sabbath, 1963. This horror anthology is a delightful trio of atmospheric horror tales. In the first story, a woman is terrorized in her apartment by phone calls from an escaped prisoner from her past. The second story portrays a Russian count in the early 1800s who stumbles upon a family in the countryside trying to destroy a particularly vicious line of vampires. The final story is about a nurse in the 1900s who makes a fateful decision while preparing one of her patient's corpse, an elderly medium that died during a seance. Italian horror specialist Mario Bava delivers a smashing hit full of thrills, chills, and exciting suspense. The movie fluently explores themes of anxiety, fear, and greed that make for a thought-provoking narrative. We will advise you to opt for the Italian version instead of the American version for the best results. While the first story is probably the weakest in the lot, you will soon be rewarded with some thrilling segments that keep the sparks alive in the plot. You are bound to feel the heat of some truly chilling moments in the course of the film. In short, this visually stylish movie from one of the finest directors in Italy will definitely be worth your time.
This is all the time we had for today's episode. We hope you guys liked it. It would be awesome if you guys can take some time to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to tell us which topic you want us to cover in the comment section. Have a fantastic day ahead and stay safe.